Welcome to a new episode of Aussaat, Serious Talk, the podcast by the network Gemeinde-Pflanzen, where everything revolves around the topics of church planting, discipleship, and evangelization. My name is Jonathan Berschauer, and I'm delighted that you are joining us today. Church planting can also take the form of church revitalization. One of the most well-known examples of church revitalization is the Church of the Nativity in Timonium, Maryland, USA. My guest today not only witnessed this revitalization firsthand, but also shaped it and made it possible in the first place. He began as a youth minister, later became the children's ministry coordinator and the director of small groups. Today he's not only the right-hand man of Father Michael White, but also responsible for the weekend message, strategic planning and staff development of the Church of the Nativity. Furthermore, he is the president of the Rebuild Parish movement and co-author of several bestsellers in the field of parish renewal. In this context, he was also awarded the Pro Ecclesia et Pontificia honor by Pope Francis in 2023, together with Father Michael White. I am thrilled that he is here with us today. A very warm welcome to Tom Corcoran.
Thank you very much. Thanks you for having me on. It's great to be with you, and later in the evening for you. So
Tom, when you and Father Michael White wrote Rebuild together, did you ever imagine that the book would become such a bestseller and be translated into multiple languages? What was your motivation to write the book back then?
I guess that answer yes and no. I did have, not knowing the publishing world, I had dreams that it would sell 100,000 copies, which it has. It sold more than that. So that was great, and very happy to have that impact. So yes, but I don't think you completely understand what you're trying to do and accomplish. So you just kind of go where God is leading you. And the reason we wrote the book was we felt like God had done some great things in our parish, and there were some things we had learned about parish revitalization and renewal, and we just wanted to share that. And partly, we both wanted to write a book, so there was a sort of desire. Father Michael was an English major, I was a writing major, so the desire to share what we had learned and writing seemed the right outlet for that.
Several years have passed since the book release, and Church of the Nativity has continued to grow. Looking back, what would you say are the most important lessons you've learned during this time?
What I would share with churches is, first of all, the importance of focus is really important, especially in the beginning. Most churches do too many things, and we don't focus on what's most important, which is, we kind of argue, is, first of all, is one of the most important things is the weekend mass and the energy and effort we put into that. So I think, continuing to stay focused, and that can be challenging, I think, all the times. I think we do share kind of the lessons we've learned. Our core foundations for building a healthy parish are creating a great weekend experience, number one, shaping a clear discipleship path for the people in the pews, being very clear about how you want them to grow as disciples, to grow wider, to have a great focus and heart for the people who are not coming to your church, and then to build layers of leaders. So, those are the kind of the four lessons we lay out at Rebuilt, to say, this is, if you want to be a growing, healthy parish. So we continue to learn that those are effective means. Those are the principles, I think, for any growing, healthy parish. But then we're learning, kind of drill down into each of those concepts, and then how we're trying to continue to learn how do we pass those on to other parishes.
So you mentioned this special points which you are also you are working on the Rebuild Parish movement. Do you think that these are the sticky points when pastors come to you and or parish staff members and ask you what are the biggest points? Would you mention this 3 or 4 points or?
Yeah, those four. Yeah, and I can recap them again just in case. To growing healthy parishes are, one, going to create an excellent weekend experience, meaning the mass and the programs around it. Two, they're going to shape a clear discipleship path or have a plan to help people become more fully devoted followers of Christ. Three, they're going to grow wider and by reaching people that aren't going to church and have a heart for that. And fourth, again, it all rises and falls on leadership. So yes, when we engage with parishes, we're trying to help them go along that path and to implement those kind of four core principles that, and you try to say what's the most important. Again, I do think the weekend, but then they always they intersect with each other as well. So parish life, of course, is very, I think the big thing parishes need to learn is to be integrated. I think so many of the things in parish life are very disintegrated and not unified, but the church is a body, right? I mean, it literally is the body of Christ. And so just like with our bodies, our physical bodies, the body is meant to work together. And when the body is working together, when the systems are working together, it's healthy. And for younger people, it grows and it takes care of itself. When it's not integrated together, the body becomes diseased and unhealthy. And the same is true in a local parish.
In Germany or in Western Europe, secularization has advanced significantly. People seem satisfied and have no longing. They are not open to questions of faith and feel they lack nothing. Based on your experience, do you have any ideas on how to foster growth and true conversions, not just transfer growth from other churches in such a secular environment? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I have some general thoughts. I mean, I think first of all, we have to start with people's felt needs. What are their needs? What is driving them? And, I think of great, Paul really started with this in Athens when he said, I see you have gods. And he kind of started with where they were and then tried to bring them into a relationship with Christ. Then he talked about the unknown God. I do think we're starting with people's felt needs. Again, I do think you start with belief. Everybody needs a relationship with God, and people are hungering for God and they're hungering for community. And those are two things as a church that we have that no one else can, right? No one else really can bring people into a relationship with God through the person of Jesus Christ, except for the church. And really, we have the true community when it's functioning well, as God intended, that people are hungering and longing for. So I think too often as a church, we start with our beliefs, or we start with we're way down on the process of where we've come to in faith instead of starting back where other people are. So, that's why I talk about growing wider. It really is understanding the unchurched people in your community and what motivates them and what moves them. What are their hopes, their fears, their dreams? Even we create this, mythical person we call Timonium Tim. I think even that exercise to think about what is it, the professions of the people in your community, or what moves them, and how do you connect the gospel? Because again, I do believe everybody has a deep hunger for God, even those who don't say it. I think we have to help connect into those, the desire for meaning and significance. And I think as a church, I wouldn't start there, but we have the ultimate trump card. We're all going to die. Like, that is just a fact. And maybe that doesn't really where we start in our evangelization, but sometimes we can point that out to people. What's the meaning and significance of your life, and where's it going? And I think those kind of things, I think, are what we need to start with.
Some weeks ago, I had a talk with a free church pastor and a professor from Germany, Philipp Bartholomä, and he said that strong, friendly relationships with non-Christians are key for creating conversions-friendly culture. You are set to release a new book in early 2025, The Transformative Power of Small Groups, and announcements reads, I quote, Father Michael White and Tom Corcoran shows how to foster faith-based friendships, which result in vibrant communities that not only sustain Christian love and service, but also change the world. And further, this concise guide shows how small groups can become the backbone of your parish pastoral care, discipleship, and evangelization efforts. Are small groups perhaps an underappreciated tool in parishes?
Yes, I do think that small groups have a great power, and to foster, as I said, the real Christian community we all long for. Again, obviously, I can only talk from the United States perspective. That's what I know better. But I think a lot of times there's pseudo fellowship, I would call. In the there'll be, again, spaghetti dinners or bingos or fundraisers. And churches will say, well, we're doing, that's our fellowship. I'm like, well, it's not really fellowship. It's a social thing, which isn't terrible. But true fellowship is really when there's life on life, authentic relationships where I know you, you know me, my strengths, but you also know my flaws and ways I'm struggling to really follow Christ, and I can be myself and authentic and be real. So I do think, yes, I think small groups are important, that any parish that begins to get serious, invested time and energy in small groups, which does take time and energy, it's messy, but it will build up a Christian community in that culture, and a culture that we do care about each other, and we are for each other. The church cares about me. And I think that's compelling. I just think that is back to evangelization. I don't know if it has a direct correlation, but I do think it is compelling for people who are drawn into a community in which people do love and care for each other. And again, I think that's something everybody's longing for. And in our world today, it's especially needed. I think COVID really isolated people and alienated people. Now, somewhat we have to wake up their need for community, but I think, again, that hunger is there.
You were personally responsible for small groups for several years. What were the most important lessons you learned during this time? What should one consider when building small groups in a parish? Could you share some tips?
Sure. I think, first of all, there needs to be a kind of long obedience in the same direction, some perseverance. It didn't happen easily. We've created that culture where it's kind of more normal to be a part of a group, and still work to do to get people into a small group. But getting people on board in the beginning, talked about it required just a dedication to want to do it. Again, I would go back to, in our book, we talk about the why behind the what. Why are you doing it? And I go back to, it is really about relationships. I do think as we get into a more secular world, there's maybe more need for teaching and on doctrine. And I've been doing parish ministry for 27 years now. I don't think I felt that as much 27 years ago. I felt like people were, especially here in Baltimore, they'd been gone to Catholic school. They kind of knew the basics, but what they really needed was relationship. And I don't think that goes away. So for us, it is about the relationships. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more teaching or in there, but the biggest thing about more doctrine in our content, maybe, but the biggest thing really is about relationships. That's the why behind the what. And that's really what you're hoping to do. Now you need, then going back, you always need leaders, right? So you do want to put people who lead those small groups, who are doctrinally sound, who know the faith at least, and they're not going to teach heresy or whatever, or can understand when things aren't true in those conversations that happen in small groups. But the big thing is you're trying to foster relationships and help people make connections. And then, there's, again, it is going to rise and fall on the leaders you get. And then, but it is understanding there's so many benefits to a small group in a parish and in a community. As you kind of talked about in the introduction, it really helps with the pastoral care. I like to say it helps people be known, loved, and cared for in a community.
One last question. You've written several books on church revitalization. Are there books or events or resources that have inspired you and that you would recommend to someone looking to rebuild their parish?
Yes, lots. So, obviously, I would encourage our own book, Rebuilt. So, obviously, hopefully,
The best, yeah, first.
But I think just reading in general and reading both religious books and business books too. So, yeah, if I were to say some of the biggest books on communication is the book Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. I use that. That's kind of my communication Bible, I would say. And that when it comes to reaching new people, that is a great point. Like, we can learn communication tools that just work everywhere. So not just preaching. Again, I think, and so Made to Stick would be my communication book. Another book by Chip and Dan Heath is called Switch: How to Change When Change is Hard. And again, for any parish that's trying to transform, and that's a really great book. Jim Collins' Good to Great is a great business book. I also like his other book, Great by Choice, which is kind of like a sequel to that as well. People to also continue to study, for Andy Stanley, who's from North Point Church in Atlanta here. We've been a big student of his, a book called Deep and Wide. I could keep going. I could keep going. A lot of books. I think listening, and then Rick Warren, of course, was for us. If you read our book, was a great mentor to us, really from afar. We've got to know him since then. But Purpose Driven Church, I think, should be a church. So
very famous book. Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are a start. I could keep going, but I think to be a continual learner and
we make a long list and show notes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, those are the ones that come immediately to mind. But I like books too, so it was actually, and books have changed my life. That's why I guess you asked at the beginning, why do you write a book? Because books have changed my life. It was actually Doug Fields, who was the youth minister for Rick Warren. He wrote a book called Purpose Driven Youth Ministry. And I read that book, which is what introduced us to Saddleback and what they were doing. It changed my whole mind, because at the time, again, I was doing ministry, youth ministry, and I was just doing a ton of things. And I was just busy, 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 and not all bad things, but just not very intentional. And it was purpose-driven youth ministry that helped me realize, oh my gosh, my problem is I don't really have a purpose, and I don't have a way to organize my ministry. And I think that is the thing I would say for anybody. And that's what Rebuild is, I hope, is a model for people, is you need to know your model for ministry and why you're doing what you're doing. And it needs to have a strategy, and it needs to make sense to you. And if you don't know what your model should be, which is what we did, borrow somebody else's, learn from their model, and then over time you'll probably change it and adjust it to fit your setting. But in the beginning, you don't know why the model works. So kind of buy it wholesale, so to speak. Or if you've been in ministry a long time, at least be able to articulate, this is how I would articulate our parish's strategy or model of ministry and how we approach. That's why I'm very grateful to, again, Doug Field, Saddleback. They gave me a framework in which to work through. Yeah, so that's sort of what we continue to hope to do today for other parish leaders.
Tom, it's been such a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you today about Rebuild in small groups. A big heartfelt thank for you for this wonderful conversation.
Great, thank you. I appreciate having me on, and again, you staying up so late. This is great. Thank you.
Dear listeners, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to the next time. As always, you can find all the information about today's episode, including links and books, references, in the show notes and our website. Feel free to share your feedback, questions, recommendations, and wishes with us per email. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to recommend us to others. Wishing you all the best for today. Be blessed.